Yeah. And it's been said you did a compressed version of, what is pretty widely the most kind of like the paragon, the champion of sound poetry, which is Ursonate by Schwitters.
Yep.
So how, you talk about how difficult it is transcribing it and, setting it down on a literate stance. So how do you go about even rehearsing something like that?
Well, the Ursonate by the painter Kurt Schwitters is widely regarded as uh, one of the greatest works of sound poetry, probably one of the most difficult to perform. It normally takes about 40 minutes to read in its entirety. It is scored for performance, and in this respect, it's relatively straightforward. It's actually possible to kind of dissect how to perform it from the score that he produced. Um, and we have recordings of him and others providing renditions of it. As a young man, I heard an extraordinary performance by a peer that just blew my mind. I thought it was a completely uncanny rendition of it, done with a kind of mechanical precision that doesn't characterize the original performance by Schwitters. The poem is structured like a classical sonata. In this respect, it's much like a work of music. It has four parts that conform to the particular acts, if you like, of a sonata. You can even, if you like, hear the component musical instruments that are being simulated by these, kind of vocal nonsense words. And for this reason, its formality makes it possible to actually commit it to memory and perform it from memory. For a while, at the height of my powers, I could perform that work very quickly from memory in as little as 10 minutes. It normally takes about 40 minutes to do in its entirety, but I could rip through it with a kind of death metal version of it very, very fast as a kind of stupid human trick. And I taught myself the poem, figuring that if I could learn this one, I could learn all the others. If I could do the most difficult one, surely the others would be more tractable. And I spent several months rehearsing, my capacity to perform this work until I became good enough at it that I felt confident I could do it in performance. Now, unfortunately, time and alcohol have taken their toll upon my cognition. I don't think that I could perform any part of it really from memory anymore. Although I feel quite good about performing it from a score, I think I would have to read it aloud, right? With the work in front of me to be able to do any justice to it now. But for
So
a while, it was fun to be able to do it from memory. It would induce in people a sense of amazement to see it performed.
so with you like fully immersing yourself in it and almost becoming intimate with this work, what has Uswanat become to you? What does it mean to you?
Well, it's an important precedent, I guess. You look at it as a work that is a paragon of its form, and it offers permissions. You learn a lot about how to write perhaps a sound poem from a work like this. Um, uh, for me, I just look at it as an important canonical work that has trained me, if you like. It's part of the disciplinary regimen that I had to take up when I wanted to understand the history of the avant-garde. I wanted to know about every single school of the avant-garde and become apt at as many of them as I could, right? To be as good as I could possibly be at any given kind of poetic style. And that work, is foundational, I suppose, for that moment in my career when I was curious about how to be a sound poet. So, I've mastered some of that work, and it feels very good to become apt at it, to sustain, I suppose, a kind of intergenerational transmission of that skill. But it is a highly idiosyncratic area of interest in the history of poetry. It's not something that it's very easy to popularize, right? No, it's a challenge, right, to get people excited about it,
Yeah.
even though they're amazed when they see it, right? They understand that it is a sublime thing to see performed. I don't know, something about its athleticism might be intimidating. Something that about the complexity of it might be intimidating to people who want to learn it. Um, but in my case, I just wanted to become excellent at things, and of course, you aspire, right, to become good by emulating the best thing.
And when you engage something so deeply in something that is rooted in phonetics and sound, rather than semantics, when you take into account, the most foundational parts of the traditional poetry, the message, the semantics, the pattern, the structure. So what gave sound poetry when you immerse yourself in Ursonate in particular? What gave you the most meaning in that? Was it the sensation around it? Was it the energy? Was it the structure? Is it something harder to articulate?
Well, I mean, the work is a very formal work. It's elegant. It's got mathematical structure to it. It's got riffs and forms of repetition in it. Rhyme throughout it. I mean, in this respect, it's very musical. It really is like a work of music. And it's Apollonian, if you like, in its creation. But when you perform it, it induces a more Dionysian experience, right? It's more delirious or euphoric or rapturous, right, to perform, and you get lost in it, right? It's a way of experiencing a bit of vertigo, I think, and you hope to be able to transmit that excitement, to audiences, right? You're trying to showcase this, rapturous outburst, this extraordinary euphoric experience in music. And convey it with through this bodily discipline, through this virtuoso athleticism, right? It requires some skill to pull it off properly.
Yeah,
I mean, it's kind of like watching a violinist play a really tough combination of chords very quickly, right? It seems amazing that it can be done, right? You look at it and it seems inhuman that somebody could do it. And I think that that's part of what excited me about it, was like demonstrating that I had the capacity, despite not thinking I could do it. That you can learn to acquire some of those skills, and for that reason, it also perhaps lends a bit of support to ambition. You could say, okay, well, I've mastered this thing, well enough that I could perform it well, and it exceeds what I thought was my own potential. Maybe I could exceed, other forms of potential. Maybe, I've got other hidden attributes I didn't know I had. Maybe, it's just a matter of willfulness, I suppose, right, to overcome certain limitations, right, in your skill sets, to do something fantastic. And I think really that's fundamental to most artistic activity. It's just a hard-nosed willingness to do difficult things, right? Try to overcome hard obstacles.
so when you're attacking this one in particular, this poem, um, what would you say, like, because with my two conclusions, did you feel you were kind of uncovering something, within this poem, within this, I would say almost disappeared work, or were you taking a more original, inventive approach, like almost generating something that wasn't in the poem in the first place?
Well, in the course of reading it and getting apt at it, you start experimenting with it. I mean, for me, listening to Eberhard Bloom do his version of it, in which he's an elocutionist. He pronounces every note, every sound, as though it were a rivet, right? It's very quick and precise and pristine. Whereas the original performance by Kurt Schwitters is more liturgical. It feels almost like a Martian opera, a little bird song, right? The opening he would read would begin something like "Thim spavatetse u pagif kvie didis I impif til sto til yuka." So you've got these incantatory elements to it, right, that are a bit thaumaturgical, right? They seem a little magical. Whereas, Eberhard Bloom is more like a machine, a robot, right? Kind of fed passion fruit and expected to perform this thing, very precisely. It's "Thims baba tetsu bigif gwi dudus I buf til to til yuka," right? Totally different kind of intonation and precision, something a little more mechanical, perhaps, a little more inhuman. And I think these are reflections of temperament, right? I mean, somebody sitting and playing Beethoven's Fifth Symphony, right, on a piano is going to inadvertently add their own timbre, their own personality, their own idiosyncrasies, right, to the rendition of it, right? Everybody's got a different vocal apparatus. Everybody's going to sing, I think, in slightly different tones and timbres and keys, that inflect the inadvertencies of our own personality, right? And sure enough, in the course of learning how to perform the Ursonate, I end up figuring out some of that stuff for myself, right? I begin to try to perform it more quickly to see, if I can hold it in my head while, enunciating very, very fast. There's no reason to do that. In fact, it probably does damage to the original work. It's probably, undermines or subverts much of its beauty in the way that speeding up any, work might vandalize it. But, I also learned things about it that I wouldn't otherwise know if I hadn't, right, started to riff off of it, right, kind of play different notes around it. So that work for me is something like a learning experience, right? It's part of the gymnasium of my background, someplace where I got my exercise, figured out how to be the kind of poet I could be, right? It's one of the places I worked out.